Hello, everyone, and welcome to Aviz Network's podcast series. My name is Ilona Gabinsky, and today I'm very happy to be joined by a very special guest, Zaid Kahn, the CEO of Neuron Factory. Zaid, I read the recent news, and congratulations on raising the funds. I'm sure it's such a great achievement.
Thank you.
Zaid is also a former chair of the Open Commute Project, OCP, and ran infrastructure AI teams in LinkedIn and Microsoft. Zaid, I'm very happy to have you join us here today, and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Ilona. It's really honored to be here, and I'm really excited to talk about a journey of SONiC at LinkedIn and beyond.
Yeah. So thank you very much for joining. And today we'll be talking about open source network operating system called SONiC that was developed by Microsoft. And Zaid, you were the first one who actually pioneered this open source networking into LinkedIn. So I wanted to hear more about your journey, and I would like to start really with the spark. What made you even consider SONiC when the whole industry was still deep in proprietary systems?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Actually, it brings back a lot of memories. So I'll sort of start like where our journey began, right? And this was actually even kind of maybe even when SONiC was still in its like super infancy at Microsoft, like it hadn't really been thought out. But basically, at LinkedIn, when we were growing really fast, we were signing up a lot of users, our traffic was growing, we were building, infrastructure really, really quickly and trying to scale. And during that time, it was very important for users to, get signed up, have the best experience, right? And that's why we were building, the LinkedIn infrastructure so that we could have, high performance. And during that time, during all that, we quickly saw that there was, a lot of challenges in network, especially, right? Traffic, like, switches failing and all these things. We want to keep the infrastructure up. If I were to think back about what sparked it, there was a very particular problem we came across, which was called microburst. It's when there's very, very high amount of traffic on switches, and then suddenly there's this little burst, and the burst is so high that it causes the network to just sort of stop for microseconds, super small, but very impactful, right? And so what happened was we really had a hard time debugging this problem. It was very painful. We worked with, our switch provider, and the switch provider was also baffled, we can't see this problem, we can't reproduce it, and all these things. And this went on for months on end at times, right? And one of the things we realized as a team is that we have no control of our destiny, right? Mm-hmm. We don't know when this will occur. The biggest problem was, we are impacting, LinkedIn users and LinkedIn growth. And so we tried to dig deep into it, and we found out that basically, our switch vendor, was at a loss. They couldn't give us the telemetry we needed to even have the visibility. Mm-hmm. And so what we had to do was just sort of rely on whatever they provided. And then we also ran into, that's sort of one problem. The other problem was, we were upgrading to the latest and greatest version of switches. We were doing a lot of infrastructure growth. And then the other problem was that there were a lot of bugs in the switches, and we were having challenges with that. And we found out that actually most of our switch failures had nothing to do with the features that we were using. There were features that were there for the general use, but because we were buying these switches with the software, we had to upgrade them in order to sort of squash these bugs. But the bugs had nothing to do with us, right? It's just that the switches would fail because of this bugs that was some odd VLAN thing that we never even used or whatever, right? So when you combine these two things, we quickly realized is that it goes back to sort of the philosophy we had at LinkedIn was that we always want to be in control of giving our users the best experience, right? So we quickly huddled as a team and says, well, we kind of looked around and Facebook at that time was actually building their own switch and their own software. And we said, well, at the way the hyperscalers are growing, we really have to come up with a way where we are in control of making sure that our customers have the best performance. So if I would say, like, we weren't out there to build our own switch, right? To be honest, like, if you ask me, like, that was not our purpose, right? The purpose was we wanted to provide the best customer experience. So if I were to sort of look at that was like, if you combine the user experience and control of destiny, that's like the thing that sparked the whole thing, right? Of how we decided to go into open source networking, right, for example, and then started looking at that time, like, do we build it? Do we go, get SONiC? And so that's when, and it was a very early time too, right? Like there was no one out there that was providing this package, right? We had to go to the ODM and get the actual hardware switch. Then we had to go figure out how to put the software on it. And so I was fortunate, we had a great team of engineers. We put our heads together and went and sort of like figured out how to do that.
That's great. That's awesome. So once you made that decision, how hard was it for you to get a buy-in from your leadership team and from your finance team? I will have a follow-up question.
Sure. Yeah, no worries. That's a great question. I mean, like I think that one is we were doing this around, I would say, 2015 or something like that, or 14. I can't remember. It was very early, it was a time when it was not an easy concept to have a buy-in from leadership. Now, everyone, like, site uptime was very important, the infrastructure uptime, network uptime. So obviously there was a lot of questions. Well, this is not proven technology. How do you, how are we going to do this? How many people we'll have to hire to support this? We're going to not have support. And so there's all these questions, right? So yes, it was difficult. Personally, it was like, putting like my career on the line to convince the company that we want to go down this route. But I'll say one thing though, at LinkedIn, we did have leadership that was very supportive of open source in general, right? So they weren't afraid of that aspect. They were just worried, like, okay, we've not done open source software, and open source hardware software is very different, right? And so I think that there was a hurdle there. The way I went around thinking about this was always take small bites. Right? So convincing them, look, we're going to try this at a very small scale and prove it, and then see how it sort of like, expands from there, right? So that's sort of like how we sort of like positioned it. Like, so the buy-in was sort of like, to answer your question on that. Yeah. I'm sure you have a follow-up. Right?
The follow-up question was, I'm sure you mentioned that you have great engineers and they're all open, including leadership team, to do open source, which was great because at that time, nobody really nobody was thinking about open source. But were there any technical or cultural roadblocks, that you had to break through? Good question. So I would say a bit of both, right? So on the technical front, it was, how do we measure up to the uptime that's expected, right? Of like 5 9-zone switches, right? For example. So that was sort of like the one technical barrier, because we had all these teams that are, dependent on the switch infrastructure being up 100%. And when you do something new like that, it's like, okay, is it going to be falling all the time or whatever, right? So I would say that, and at LinkedIn, we had this stateful and stateless applications. So stateless was easier. The hurdle was the stateful, right? Because if you drop packets on the floor, you are going to lose data, right? So that, I think, was sort of like the technical hurdle. Culturally, there was, I think that, if I look at it, some of the engineers felt like, hey, I know, I can pick up a phone call and call my vendor when something goes wrong. Here I don't. How to do that? So part of it was, I think, as a leadership team, we decided that, we are going to, we're going to have to, educate, bring people along. And that's always a challenge. One is the cultural mindset shift. I think the biggest value there was that as we were building and scaling the network, it was also getting very hard to manage it, right? And so the manual work, we wanted to like completely automate that. And there wasn't really good solutions out there in the vendor space that, enabled us, because we had to buy very expensive software, or it wouldn't integrate well. So we wanted to control our destiny there as well, right? Because we had very good infrastructure on, let's say, doing compute, right, management, but network switches was a big sort of area,
And so we wanted to remove that sort of pain that people had. So I think that eventually we had to like cross that bridge with the hurdle with the engineers who. So there was a bit of a cultural shift there that we invested in, and I think the biggest challenge there was that I think people were worried about sort of like the risk that they would take. And so I always say that risk and reward are sort of like very mutual, where you reward them equally, whether it's success or failure. I just generally kind of like tell people, hey, take this shift that you have to, and then got people excited, right? And so I think that was there. The other aspect was proving to leadership and business, right? One I think key aspect was that just having to show the financial aspects of it, right? Was actually a big one. I had to show that look, if you invest now, and the team doesn't have to be super big. It's you invest now, but then like at some point down the road, it's like zero cost, right? You pay it off, right? And so the financial aspects actually looked good, like down the road. So I showed like, look, we're paying, here tens of $1,000s per switch, and now we're going to actually spend like way less than half of that. Then it looked really good because at LinkedIn, I think when I left, we were like, hundreds of thousands of switches, right? So it's definitely like a big number that you're saying,
absolutely.
Right?
So with how many switches did you start? Since you mentioned that you need to start slow and
really small number, like 10 switches, right? Like really start small cluster, and then
how
we kind
long
of like
did it take you to realize, okay, now we can progress?
It took us about maybe a year to get there, right? Given the scale we were at, and then like I said, right, we had parts of the workload that were not impacted as much when you transitioned or when there were switch upgrades going on, and there was some there. So we just took the route of like making sure that we did not bite too much at one time, and did a canary and proved, and then got people comfortable. And it was not just the network people, right? You have to get the application people comfortable as well. And so that's all that was like very necessary. And then eventually when the adoption happened, like nobody even thought about it, right? Because we were able to manage it and have the team to support it. And we had also software around it, right? That was helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned, you reward your people equally with failure or success. Yeah. So I have two questions.
Yeah.
Was there any failure with that adoption? And what is the part that you're most proud of while adopting SONiC? If there was a failure, how did you cope with that? And if you can share your proud moment, maybe a moment that not necessarily other people know about, but something that you can share with the
absolutely.
audience.
Look, there was failure, right? There was things we didn't know that we discovered later. Like a lot of it was around like surprises. Like we had, there was aspects of the physical switch that we didn't, understand, and we had to actually go and debug and even write code to solve the problems. I would say that like those happened, but then because we had control of our destiny with SONiC, we were able to fix them really fast, right? And I think that like people realize that like to me, like I said, like it's an equal reward, right? So people knew that, hey, I can go fix this thing and get it right the next time, right? So that was part. I would say that the proudest thing is the people, right? The amount of dedication people had around SONiC, and that's how the SONiC community really became really good, is because I think people were very happy at contributing back the code and being part of it and making sure that they felt like it was theirs. And the SONiC community aspect sort of was what was brewing at LinkedIn with all our developers, right? And then hence outside, and they could solve problems quickly. I would say that was sort of like, if I were to say, yes, I can talk about problems, technical problems all day, but at the end of the day, the most I'm proud of is how people embraced it and brought it to success.
Yeah. So, what advice can you give to enterprises who are interested in adopting SONiC but they don't have that level of support and scale as you had at LinkedIn.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, and it's also very true, right? Like we had the luxury of putting a team together, and I know that that's a tough one, right? I would say that one advice is like one is don't be afraid. You're at a place now where SONiC is much more widely supported, right? In fact, we had when I was at OCP, we had kind of incubated SONiC when I started at OCP. This was even when I was before the chair, I was on the board, and then eventually OCP grew so vast that so many enterprises started to adopt it, and we got to that point where we actually took SONiC out of OCP and put in Linux Foundation. It's its own sort of entity to manage, and now it has its own board, its own ecosystem around it. So one thing I would say is that the ecosystem is there to back you, and second, and so don't be afraid. Number one. Two, start small, like adopt and then grow. And start small. And third is, you've got companies like, Aviz Networks that has got now turnkey solutions, right? And what Aviz is doing, with advanced telemetry, bring AI into the platform and all these things, these are actually much easier times. So it will actually be a lot easier than when we were trying to do it back in 2014 or 15.
Absolutely. And actually what we are seeing right now in the market as well, that SONiC is not just for hyperscalers anymore. Enterprises are looking into SONiC, smaller organizations, and even if we have customers with as low as up to 20 or 50 switches, and they also see a lot of benefits that you mentioned actually with control and significant cost savings. You also mentioned that you saw maybe like 50% cost reduction after adopting SONiC.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The adoption is super wide, and I'm like really happy to have been part of this journey to see like where it exploded to, and I think it's one of the finest open source programs out there.
Yeah, I would just have one last question.
Sure.
So I would still like to go back and bring Aviz into the conversation for a moment. So how important do you think is this support that we are providing, since from your vantage point, right? Because you implemented SONiC in one of the biggest organizations, LinkedIn. And you've been working with a lot of enterprise companies. So what is your opinion on that?
So I think that Aviz is the easy button, right? Think of it as like, you got that easy button, right? Like that is how I kind of envision Aviz Networks, right? Where you just, because it's more turnkey, it's shrink wrap, it has great management capabilities, telemetry, advanced like AI features that give you a lot of visibility. All these things are like, I think that is an easy enabler, and I think that's what Aviz provides, right? It's got that approach, so that when you are bringing it to the enterprises, it's not a very difficult thing, and I think that's a very key aspect of what Aviz is doing, and because it basically makes it a whole lot easier for people to do the adoption and to get the support, right? They can actually, like I was saying earlier, that people were worried that they didn't have a vendor to call. Right. They don't have to worry about it, because there is Aviz is the vendor on top of that, and they'll carry you right through the journey, right? And so I wish that like, if I were to go back, like, if let's say if I were to do something now, I would say, wow, this is a no-brainer, because I do actually have a team of experts that have built great software around it, and also I don't have to invest in that, right? And so actually their story to their financial story is actually a lot better, right? Because they do have that ability to sell it with support and all of that.
Yeah, this is great. Any last thoughts or piece of advice you want to share with the audience in terms of SONiC? I know you already shared a lot. Don't be afraid. Start small. Use take control in your hands. Things like that. If you would like to share anything else.
Yeah, and look, I would say that embracing open source is something that is not something one should be afraid of, right? Like, it's not like there's just know that there's great backing behind it. One is the community, but also the businesses that are building the ecosystem around it, like Aviz, right? Is a good indication why you should adopt open networking operating systems. And I'm hoping that there's more of that in the infrastructure industry as we move forward, right?
Right. Zaid, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for giving this or sharing the information and sharing your advice. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you very much. A pleasure to have this conversation.